Hey everybody, it's Matt. Welcome back to the Journey Church podcast. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can automatically get our weekly episodes. And you might want to go ahead and subscribe to our Journey YouTube channel as well. You'll find messages, music, interviews, inspiring stories, and more for you all right there. Now, I hope this episode helps you take your next step in following Jesus. Today, we are continuing the series we've been in over the last couple of weeks called Who Needs Jesus? If you haven't been with us, you can go to our YouTube channel if you find this interesting and you want to catch up. I want to tell you real quick where we're going in the future over the next couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to talk about the idea of justice. Do you really need to believe in Jesus? Do you really need Jesus involved in order to have justice? We all want justice in the world. We definitely want justice in our own lives, but when other people do something to us. But do you have to introduce Jesus in the equation to have justice? We're going to talk about that next week. I think it'll be helpful for you. And then the final week of the series, we're going to talk about forgiveness. Who doesn't need forgiveness? I mean, we all do. But do you need to invite Jesus to the table in order to experience forgiveness? We'll talk about that. And then the last Sunday of the month is a bit of a bonus episode, okay? An epilogue to the series, if you will, and you're not going to want to miss that. That's September 24th, because I've invited a really good friend of mine from Ohio. His name's Matt Brown. I've invited him to come and share his story with you because it is inspiring. It is encouraging, and Matt's going to take all of this stuff I've talked about and left you scratching your head like he didn't explain that well. Matt will tie it all together and make it all make sense, all right? So it'll be a footnote, if you will, to the series. Will be a good way to wrap all that up, so I hope you'll be there for that. Today, we're going to talk about this word right here, the word freedom. The word freedom. I don't know of anything we Americans love more than our freedom. I mean, it is at the top of the list, isn't it? We don't like being told what to do for anything. If you don't believe me, and for those of you who are, 35 and under, this would be a really comical way to spend an hour. Go on YouTube and search for people's opinions of the seatbelt law, okay? That's all you got to do. Now, you don't remember this, but back in the day, and they got some videos, back in the day, it was like, hey, everybody needs to wear a seatbelt. That's going to be a law. Seems like common sense, doesn't it? I don't want to go through my windshield. Thank you for, making sure we do that. But no. We Americans, that's not the way we approach that. We're like, we'd rather go through our windshield than somebody tell us what to wear. So, it was, when you start seeing some of these interviews, it's pretty funny. There's some other topics I won't go into. It's the same thing. But anyway, we just don't like it. I mean, it could be in our best interest, but if you're going to tell me to do it, then no, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather hurt myself than do something just because you tell me to do it. Over time in America, it wasn't always this way. Over time, our idea of freedom has changed. And without going into this too deep, if you've read much American history, especially our founding fathers, their idea of freedom was we need political freedom, economic freedom, religious freedom, and it was for the common good. But when you talk to people today about freedom, Americans in particular, we tend to describe freedom as being more about my good than the common good. That's what we're most concerned about. I do not want any limits, constraints, or restraints on me because I'm worried about me. So the way people think of freedom today is this. We think of freedom as doing whatever I want, whenever I want, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. You want a little bit of that? Let's be honest. We all do, don't we? It sounds good. As a matter of fact, we measure our progress in life, many of us, by how much of this freedom or autonomy we're gaining, how close we're getting to the point where we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. This is the goal. This is now the American dream, which is why we want financial independence. We want financial freedom. I want to get to the point in life where I don't have to work if I don't want to work. No, I don't have to listen to anybody. I don't have to deal with that boss. If I want to walk out, I can walk out because I got enough money. I can do whatever I want, and I don't need a job anymore. This is what we want in life in general. This is what some of you who are working towards retirement, this is what you think retirement is going to be. I'm going to introduce you to some retired folks and burst your bubble, but that's what we're all shooting for. It's what you think retirement's going to be. I can do whatever I want then when I get there. This is a big deal to us in America, and it sounds like a really good thing. Here's the problem with this, not to be depressing, but here's the problem with this. This is actually an impossible way to live. It's impossible because it's illogical. No one actually can live their life with the freedom to do whatever they want, whenever they want, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. And part of the reason it's impossible is because we can't even all agree on what hurts somebody. We can't. You sit down with people and you go, well, I got the freedom to do that. And they're going, no, you shouldn't because that's not, that's hurting them. And you're like, no, it's not hurting. We can't even agree. I'll give you a bit of an extreme example. There are some people, and some of you in the room, this may be you. There's some people who say, you know what? I should have the freedom to consume pornography because pornography doesn't hurt anybody. So it should be something I should absolutely do. But there are other people who are going to make an argument, no. When you consume pornography, you are feeding an industry that fuels sex trafficking and degrading of other human beings, often women. And you're feeding or fueling an industry where it's changing the way you view the opposite sex, which means you value them less. I mean, there's an argument that's being made on both sides of it. We can't even agree. So how can you pursue the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, if somebody else disagrees with you and thinks what you're doing is actually hurting somebody? You say, well, they're dumb. They're wrong. Okay, I get it. But now it's tricky because you're making moral judgments about your freedom and their freedom. So it's a bit hypocritical if you do that. The other reason that this is an impossible way to actually live in reality is because whatever you want, whenever you want it, often conflicts with each other. In other words, you often want the freedom to do multiple things at the same time, and you can't have them all. Simple example. Let's imagine that there's a 60-year-old grandfather who wants the freedom to eat whatever he wants whenever he wants. And he also wants the freedom to enjoy time with his grandchildren in retirement, okay? And he goes to the doctor one day, and the doctor looks at him, and she says, hey, if you keep exercising your freedom to eat whatever you want, you're not going to be around for your grandchildren. You don't have much longer, you got to change. Well, what's he going to do at that point? There's a conflict. You can't be free to do everything at once. He is going to have to choose to limit one of his freedoms, and he will choose which one to limit based on which freedom out of the two he thinks will give him a better life. And hopefully for his grandkids, he chooses to limit his eating. But who knows, Who knows? This is what we run into all the time. I think I should be able to do whatever I want whenever I want, but the things that we want, we can't even have all of them if we had the freedom to have them. And so to be able to live this way, while it sounds really good and while we're all shooting for it, we may be shooting at the wrong target. We may be trying to arrive at a destination that is impossible to arrive at because you cannot experience freedom with no limitations. You can't experience freedom with no constraints. A better way to think about freedom is this. Freedom is the ability to intentionally choose to lose lesser autonomy to gain greater autonomy. Or to put it in really simple terms, freedom is when I have the ability to choose and go, I'm going to give up my freedom here because it's going to allow me to experience a better freedom over there. I'm going to give up my freedom to eat whatever I want whenever I want because that's going to kill me. I'm going to give up that freedom because I want to experience the freedom of spending time with grandkids, whatever your thing may be. This is the way freedom actually works. You can't have freedom without constraints and limitations. They're going to always be a part of it. The trick is choosing the right constraints and limitations to give you the best freedom. Now, if all of that was you're like, what's that have to do with anything? Tune back in for a second, okay? Because here's where it gets really important. The reason this matters to us is because every human being, all of us, have a desire for three things. We have a desire for purpose, meaning, and significance in life. Never met a human being who didn't. We all want purpose, meaning, and significance. The thing we don't realize is our purpose, meaning, and significance and our freedom are tied together. Because whatever you look to as the source of purpose, meaning, and significance in your life, you will have to give up some of your freedom to that thing, to that person, to that source. In other words, if you come to the conclusion that your career is going to be the source of your purpose, meaning, and significance in life, well, guess what? You're not free anymore because your career will cause you to limit or constrain your freedoms in other areas with your family, with hobbies, with you name it, because your career is now going to be the strongest voice in your life and it will be dictating the decisions you make. Now flip it on the other side. If you decide that your family is the source of your purpose, meaning, and significance, well, same thing happens. You're not actually free. Now your family is the strongest voice in your life. which will limit or constrain some of the other freedoms you have in life. There'll be things you have to say no to in order to prioritize your family most. Whatever the thing is, that is the top priority in your life. The number one value, the strongest voice that dictates or informs or shapes your decisions and your life. Whatever that thing is you give the most worth to in life, that thing becomes your leader. Or to use an old term, that thing becomes your master. That thing will always limit and constrain your freedoms in other areas of your life. So as I was preparing and researching for this series, I ran across a quote from an author by the name of David Foster Wallace, and I'd never heard of him. Most of you probably haven't. Maybe you have. He apparently, in the philosophical world, has been one of the most influential authors of the last 30 years, and he's passed away. But David Foster Wallace was not a religious person. He wasn't a Christian. He wasn't religious at all. And yet, when he was talking about this very idea of having to constrain your freedoms and choose what the source of the loudest voice, strongest voice is going to be in your life, he did a masterful job of describing this. And ironically enough, he chose to describe it in religious terms, even though he wasn't religious. And I thought it might be helpful to share this with you because he breaks this down in a way that makes it pretty easy to understand. Here's what he wrote. He said, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as not worshiping. Well, that sounds really religious, doesn't it? He says, yeah, everybody worships. Worship just means I'm giving highest value or worth to that thing. So this is his way of saying, all of us choose to make something the strongest influence, the strongest voice in our lives. And he says, I'm just going to call it what it is. That's worshiping. I'm not religious, but that's worshiping. That's all it is. So he says the only choice that we get is what we worship, not whether we're going to worship. The only choice any human being gets is what they choose to make the strongest voice, what they allow to be the number one value in their life, and what by virtue of that, they allow to limit or constrain the freedoms in other areas of your life. The only choice you get is what you worship. And he says, an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual thing to worship, which is his way of going, all right, I'm not even religious, but you can make a compelling case you should worship. Pick your God of choice, but you should worship some God. You should worship some spiritual thing. And here's why he says, an outstanding reason for this is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. Any created thing you worship. He's going, it'll wreck your life. What do you mean by that? Well, he gives us some examples. He says, if you worship money and things, if they're where you tap real meaning in life, so they're the source, he says, well, you'll never feel you have enough. Why is that? Well, because that's an appetite that's never fully or finally satisfied. And you know this, it doesn't matter who you meet and how much money they have or how many things they have. You've never met anybody that said, I feel so secure with what I have, I don't think I could ever lose it all. I'm good for the rest of my life. I don't have anything to worry about. I don't need any more. You've never met anybody who said that. Because no matter how much you have, there is always the fear that you don't have enough. Because what if you lose it? Then you would lose your meaning and your safety and security in life. So he's going, no, you make money and things the strongest voice in your life, the primary influencer, the thing that shapes all your decisions, and well, it's going to lead you down a road of fear. He goes on, he gives another example. He says, worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And then he says, when time and age start showing up, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. Thought that was kind of humorous. I work out every morning. And for years, I worked out on campus at Murray State. And because they changed it, so I was with a bunch of, 18 to 22-year-olds. And they changed the time they opened it up, which doesn't matter, but I had to move gyms. So now I work out with a bunch of senior adults, okay? It's been quite the change. I like the new gym better because I feel like a rock star athlete in my new gym. I'm telling you, the old one, it was a reminder of what I used to be. The new gym, I'm like, y'all suck. Look at me, It's like, y'all, that's all you can do? So anyway, I'm talking to some of these guys who've been around there, and I joke with them. I'm like, guys, you realize we're not here to actually get better. We're just here to slow down getting worse. That's really all we're doing. Now, for all of you who are younger, especially in your 20s, you don't get this yet. That's okay. I'm just telling you, it's very depressing. There's going to come a point, and I'm not going to say where it is, but I'm sure none of you have hit it yet. But there's going to come a point where you cross over and you just start the decline, okay? And the best you can do is slow the ball down. But you're not going up anymore. This is what David Foster Wallace is talking about. He's going, okay, if you decide that your health, that your body, that your looks, that's what's most important to you in life. He's going, well, the problem is you're gonna cross over that peak at some point. It doesn't matter what you do. Line up all the Botox you want, ladies. It is not going to fix it. You're going to keep rolling downhill. You can slow it down. His point is you're going to keep rolling downhill. And every day you're going to get up, it's just a little bit worse, which is why he says you're going to die 1 million deaths before they ever get you in the ground, because every day it's going to be like, oh no, I'm less of what I intended to be. He's going, you just can't, again, this is not a religious guy, but he's going, you don't want to make that the primary value of your life. You don't want to make that the strongest voice, because you're going to live with constant fear that you don't measure up, that you're not enough. He goes on. Here's his next example. He says, worship power. Now, none of us in here would say we worship power. So the question I would ask you is, do you like to be in control all the time? And the answer for some of us is yes. And that is another word for power, okay? So you worship power. He says, you want to be in control all the time. You will end up feeling weak and afraid. Why? Well, you will need ever more power, he says, over others to keep the fear at bay. You know why? Because people who have power and control, and that's the most important thing in their life, they never feel like they have enough power and control to be certain they won't lose power and control. If you're one of these people, you get this. Because what if something happens and I begin to lose the power and control I have? So you're always trying to grab more. You're never content. Because there's this constant fear you can lose it. He gives one more example. He says, worship your intellect. Worship being smart. All right, for some of you, this lands close to home because you value intelligence so much. Like you only want to hang out with other intelligent people, which is why I'm honored that you show up here and listen to some dummy like me every now and then. But you don't want to hang out with anybody with intelligent people. You don't want to be around any kids that aren't intelligent. You just want to invest and have friendships with smart people. That's what matters to you. Everybody has to see you as smart. If they don't see you as smart, you got to prove you're smart, you know? This is some of you. He says, well, you worship your intellect and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. You know why? Because you're always afraid that one day something's going to roll up, a problem's going to show up that you can't figure out. And the minute you run into something you can't figure out, now you've got to try to hide you can't figure it out unless or until you're found out. This is his point. That whenever you choose to put any of these things that are so common and so natural for us to put as the strongest voices in our life, as the value, as the thing of most worth, he says all of those things do nothing but usher in fear. That's it. Fear of not being good enough, looking good enough, being healthy enough, being smart enough, being wealthy enough, being in control enough. It's just fear. Because there's no finish line. You're always chasing something you can never actually catch. Now, some of you are sitting there and you're thinking, I'm about smarted all of y'all because I'm not going to give anything control in my life. I'm going to be independent. So I'm not letting any of those things take any of my freedoms away. I'm not letting any of those things create fear for me. I'm going to be independent. I'm not going to rely on anyone or anything, to which I would chuckle and say, congratulations, you have just made independence the most important thing in your life. And you know what independence does? It takes away your freedom to be able to trust and be vulnerable and rely on anyone else, which means you will end up isolated, and in all probability, you're extremely lonely, because that's where independence takes you. This is the problem that we run into. It's so natural to value these things above anything else, whatever the thing is that you tend to gravitate towards. And we'll gravitate towards it for a lot of different reasons. You know, when I was younger, My parents, the people who raised me, they said I was lazy. They said I wasn't smart. I'm going to show them. I'm going to prove to them. Or we never had anything, so now I'm going to have money and I'm going to have stuff and I'm never going to have to work. There are a lot of reasons why we do this. The problem is we're chasing something we can never catch. And we get somewhere and realize this did not deliver what I thought it would deliver. We thought it would bring freedom, and we get there and are disappointed to discover there is no freedom to be found. So what do you do? What do you do? What's interesting, because Jesus' perspective on this was unique. His perspective on it was not, hey, I want to help you get to the point in life where you have so much freedom you can do whatever you want whenever you want. He never taught that. Instead, Jesus flipped it and said, no. Everyone is going to be controlled by something. Everyone is going to have some master. Everyone is going to choose to value something that forces you to limit or constrain certain freedoms. So Jesus' point was, you better be wise in what you choose. And his invitation was for us to choose him as our master or him as our top value. Here's how he put it. He said, if you hold to my teaching, this was his way of saying, if you decide you're going to live in line with the way I have designed you, so you're going to say, I value you enough, Jesus, that whatever you say I'm going to do, when it conflicts with anything else, that's fine. I'll let you limit my freedoms. I'll let you place limitations and constraints on me, Jesus. He says, if you will hold to my teaching, then you really are my disciples. In other words, then I'm really your leader, or I'm really your master. Now, he didn't say if you believe my teachings, because that doesn't get you there. A lot of us believe some of it. He's going, no. If you actually live it out and apply it, then in practicality, I'm actually your leader and your master now, because you are orienting your entire life. You're letting me shape your decisions and inform your thinking. He says the minute that happens, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. At the moment that you decide to live in line with God's teachings, Jesus says, I am going to lead you. This is why he invites us. I am going to lead you to perfect freedom. And this is interesting. Jesus taught when we get out of line with his design for us and with his teachings, unlike all the other things we can worship, he does not punish us. He doesn't make us feel worse because we didn't achieve it. He forgives us. That's what his death and resurrection was all about. He forgives us. And then he leads us right back to freedom. Here's how this looks practically. If you follow Jesus and his teachings, if you decide, okay, I've got to give something or someone the top priority in my life, it's actually going to be Jesus. When you follow him and his teachings, you give up, for example, the freedom to hold a grudge. Because he said, no, people who follow me, you don't hold grudges. That's not an option. So you have to give up the freedom to hold a grudge. But you know what you gain? You gain a greater freedom of forgiveness. Because when you forgive, what happens? The people who hurt you no longer have power over you. So Jesus' invitation is, would you please give up this lesser freedom you have to hold a grudge to gain the greater freedom of forgiveness, so the people who hurt you, they don't impact or influence you anymore. If you follow Jesus and his teachings, you have to give up the freedom to be greedy, to assume that everything is for me and about me, to take care of me first. I got to make sure I protect me. I got to make sure I'm secure. I got to make sure I have everything I need. You have to give up that freedom. But Jesus says you gain the freedom of generosity, which means money and things no longer have power over you. Money and things aren't driving you and impacting your relationships negatively. If you follow Jesus and his teachings, you have to give up the freedom to be sexually active with whoever you want, whenever you want. Because Jesus said, nope, sex is for married people. On the other hand, according to Jesus, you gain the freedom of intimacy because intimacy is fueled by exclusivity. You give up, when you follow Jesus and his teachings, you give up the freedom to be selfish. Just think about yourself and look out for you, number one. But you gain the freedom of a kind of selflessness that allows you to live with integrity and have trust, deep trust in relationships, where your relationships are so much richer. This is what he's getting at. If you will hold, and this is counterintuitive, but if you will hold to my teachings, you're going to have to give up some lesser freedoms. You're going to have to put some constraints and limitations and restraints on some of your choices and your lifestyles. But he says, I'm not inviting you to do that to take you to a worse place. I'm inviting you to do that to take you to the best place. I'm inviting you to do that so you could gain the greater perfect freedom I created you to experience. So, you could think of it this way. In reality, freedom is found in surrendering to the right master. Because we all have a master. We all have a strongest voice in our lives. We all have something or someone that's limiting our freedoms in different areas of life. There's something that's guiding us all. Jesus' point is freedom is surrendering to the right master, which brings up the question, which master are you going to choose? Because this is the freedom you have. You have the freedom to choose which voice will be the strongest voice in your life. Which one will it be? I want to end with sharing with you a quote by a late pastor and author. He died in the last year. His name's Tim Keller. As he was addressing or writing about this, I just thought he did a great job of framing this up for all of us and leaving us all with a question that we need to consider. Here's what he wrote. He said, the reality is that we are none of us free agents, which just means none of us actually have the freedom to do what we want whenever we want. That's an illusion. None of us are free agents. We are all worshiping and serving something. The better question, he says, is this: which master will affirm, cherish, empower, and honor us, and which ones will exploit and abuse us? In other words, he says, could you just pause and play it out down the road and go, okay, if I let that be the strongest voice in my life, where's it going to take me? Is that going to exploit and abuse me? Is that going to introduce more fear into my life? Or is that master going to cherish and affirm and encourage me? He goes on to write, there is no such thing as freedom without constraints. That doesn't actually exist. He says this instead: what we should be looking for are the liberating constraints that fit our nature and design, the way we were created to be. And then he leaves us with this question. He says, which master is the right master for our hearts and lives, and so brings those right constraints? Another way of saying that is, which thing can you make the most important thing in your life? And it's actually always going to do what's in your best interest. Which thing can you make the strongest voice in your life? And it's always going to lead you to the right place, to the best place in life. Now, you can pick whatever you want, but Christianity is the only thing that offers this. Christianity is the only thing that offers a God who chose willingly to give up his freedom so we could gain ours. Christianity is the only place you can find where God says, I'm going to limit and constrain my freedom by taking on human form. And I'm going to live with all those limitations, and then I'm going to give up all my freedom on a Roman cross. So you can be forgiven, and you can have the ultimate freedom you were created to have. So we all get to choose. We all get to choose what's going to be the strongest voice, the most important value, the thing that shapes our lives. Jesus says, as counterintuitive as it sounds, will you surrender your freedom to me and let me guide you and lead you to the perfect freedom that you were created to experience? That is counterintuitive, but that is also life-changing when you experience it. So as we wrap up, what I want to invite you to do, whether you're a follower of Jesus, not a follower of Jesus, I want to invite you to, evaluate what's actually the strongest voice in my life. What's actually the thing or the person who I value more than anything else? What's actually the thing that I have surrendered my freedom to and is shaping my life? And if it is not leading you in such a way that it will encourage and affirm and honor and guide you to complete freedom, then maybe you need to switch. Maybe it's time you surrender your life and your freedom to the one who gave up his freedom so you could have freedom, that you surrender it to Jesus. And you trust him, that if you'll hold to his teachings, you'll give up lesser freedoms to gain greater ones over and over again. You want to be free? The way to be free is to follow him fully. That's where you find it. Let me pray for us. Father, this is hard to do, and it's hard to do because it's just not natural to us. What's natural is to gravitate towards valuing the things that our hearts want most, whether it's money and possessions or power and control or health and looks or intellect. And while all of those things are good in and of themselves, none of them actually lead us to the freedom we want. They only lead to more fear. So would you help us to have the wisdom not to allow any of those things to continue to call the shots and be the ultimate things in our lives? Help us to have the wisdom to surrender our freedom to you. Thank you, Jesus, for proving how much you loved us. Thank you for giving up your freedom to make it possible for us to gain ours. Help us not to miss that as we follow you this week. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, if you'd like more content like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our Journey app to access all of our recent message content. And our app is the easiest way to share this content with a friend. For more information on our church or to find our app or our YouTube channel, just visit JourneyCalway.com. That's JourneyCalway.com. Thanks for listening.